Hi, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio, where our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the station or the host. Folks, I have a phenomenal guest with me today, as I always have phenomenal guests. And I'm going to tell you about my guest. My guest is Nate G. Hilger. Hope I pronounced your last name right, Nate. Nate is author and writer of The Parent Trap, not to be confused with the movie now. It has nothing to do with the movie. The Parent Trap, How to Stop Overloading Parents and Fix Our Inequality Crisis. Nate Hilger also earned a bachelor's degree in economics from Stanford University and a PhD in economics from Harvard University. He has worked as a professor of economics at Brown University and economist and data scientist in Silicon Valley. While in academia, he was a research fellow at the National Bureau of Economic Research and continues to hold an affiliation with the Population Studies and Training Center at Brown. In 2020, he served as a lead policy consultant on early childhood and non-K-12 child development issues for Pete Buttigieg's presidential campaign. He has won grants and fellowships from the National Science Foundation, the Russell Sage Foundation, the Hoover Institute, and the Kauffman Foundation. Folks, I always recommend Google my guests because I could go on because they are so phenomenal and there's so much about them. But I want to welcome Nate Hilger to Chatting with Betsy. Hi, Nate. Hope I didn't kill your name too much.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Betsy. Thanks for the introduction. You pronounced my name perfectly, and I don't care if you mispronounce it.
Okay. Well, you are a very smart guy from your impressive background. And how did you get from the economic part of your life to writing a book about parenting? I know you're a parent yourself, but
yeah.
Go ahead.
I became a parent after I had mostly written the book. Actually, it wasn't.
Wow.
It wasn't really It was very strange to be writing a book about parenting before I became a parent. But I just kind of got convinced from the research and my own research and, mostly other people's amazing research that, parents are playing this quiet, central role in the national economy. And we're, by placing way too large a burden on them, we're kind of sabotaging our own economic prospects at a really grand scale. I think it's not as big a leap as it might seem. Some people think economists focus primarily on interest rates and inflation, and that's a little bit of an outdated view. Today, economists study all kinds of issues in the family and criminal justice and every aspect of human behavior. It's really a set of techniques, statistical and theoretical techniques, kind of a way of thinking, and not really a specific domain about macroeconomics or anything like that. So a lot of other really smart economists are focusing on child development these days. That was a natural step for me. I was just really interested in child development, where success comes from. I think I got really interested in that from an early age, partly because I went to a very diverse public school and I became good friends with the kids from all kinds of different families, rich families and poor families, highly educated families and very working class families. And I think one of my favorite things about high school that I miss as an adult is when you meet people and you become friends with them, you get to meet their whole families.
Yes.
And it's just, you just learn so much about them and you see such different aspects of the world. And I saw some friends getting so many opportunities at home. Betsy, before we started recording, you were telling me about the kinds of practices that you saw parents doing with your preschool kids. Was it preschool or kindergarten that you taught?
Preschool. And kindergarten.
Yeah, and kindergarten. Yes, you were telling me about, parents really holding their kids' hands through getting them homework, helping them go to after-school extra math practice, helping them play the violin and the piano and play soccer and all this extra stuff outside of school. And I saw that with some of my friends too, and I saw other friends who tended typically to come from a working class background not getting any of those opportunities. And so that just got me really interested in this issue and how important I wanted to know how important these different kinds of child development practices were for long-term economic outcomes, and that shaped my career as a researcher and ultimately led me to write this book.
Well, I have to tell the audience, I read this book, this is August already. I think I read your book in April or May, and I was really intrigued with the information that is in this book, the things that you would not think about. You talked about a child getting, a great head start, how that affects the economy. Like, I never thought of that before. So I think your book will really jumpstart people to thinking about, wow, these services for children are really important for them to be successful and be able to earn a living. I mean, was just
Great.
Incredible.
I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, I mean, I'm one small part of a large chorus of researchers trying to help people realize the bigger stakes involved in helping kids succeed and providing broader kinds of support to make sure that happens.
I have to also say, like, I've seen it all. I've worked in a preschool for, I think, 13 years, and there were parents that really, they wanted the homework. They have their kids and all these, activities. And then there were parents who couldn't be bothered doing work with their child and wanted us to do it, like didn't even want to get involved. And these parents were financially able to do that. I mean, but because they both worked and worked very long hours, they're exhausted by the time they come home. And they didn't want to be bothered. But when you see people who don't have the advantages that other people do, I mean, I know in my case, I grew up in I would say it was considered middle class at that time in the 60s. I would say we were lower middle class, but they didn't have computers and all that, technology. But even with my son, I would not have been able to afford to get him a computer. I mean, he didn't need one the time he was going to school, but, what do these kids do when they don't have access?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think some people, to your point, there's a lot of variation. In the book I focus a lot on class differentials because there are big average differences across kids whose parents have more and less money, more and less education, more and less professional experience. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of variation within these groups as well. Some rich kids don't get a lot of opportunity, and some poor kids get a lot of opportunity. So it's not like a formula. People are complicated. But some people react to this idea you mentioned a little bit differently. They think, well, that's kind of up to the parents. In fact, I think maybe a large share of Americans would react by saying that's kind of the parents' responsibility. And if they don't want to make the sacrifices involved to get their kid a computer or to spend the time to help their kid get their math homework done, that's kind of not everybody else's responsibility. That's the parents' responsibility. And what I'm hoping the book can convey is that you can have that attitude, but you're going to pay a very large price for that attitude. When millions of kids are growing up who are not becoming as productive as they could have otherwise, they could have been teachers, they could have been scientists, they could have been firefighters, they could have been entrepreneurs, but instead, they drop out of high school, they go to a much lower quality college, they get a much less lucrative, productive major, they wind up involved, some kids can wind up involved in criminal justice, expensive, disastrous situations. Kids can wind up in, needing disability insurance and unemployment insurance and welfare and a lot of other programs that are valuable and necessary, but they're expensive. How much are you willing to pay to reinforce this idea that it's individual parents' responsibility to get their kids all the complicated, elaborate opportunities that they really need during that first critical 18 years of life? And we don't really realize we're paying trillions of dollars a year to have that attitude. And I think if more people understand the very steep price we pay for the ideology of parental individual responsibility, they might question their allegiance to that idea.
Yes, I felt that your book was very eye-opening. Like, I never thought myself, in reading your book, I was never thought of, wow, if we give a child, every child, the same opportunities, then they can be successful, and they won't be on welfare. I mean, it's something that I never thought of because I didn't, grow up with that type of knowledge. And everyone was the same in the 60s, basically, the 60s and 70s. It was basically the same. And, I know in your book, like I said, I read it back in April or May, to give a child early education, like start there from the ground floor, early intervention that they needed. My son, Josh, received early intervention. I didn't pay for it. And I don't know if you have to pay for it now because this was over 30 years ago. We went to a local hospital pediatric rehab. And, he had the service, and Josh was in special ed throughout until he was going to graduate from middle school. And I found out, knowledge is power, folks. I'm going to tell you that. I found out about programs. I found out about private schools. And I told the child study team, this is where I want Josh. Because they stop services, Nate, after a certain age. They think, okay, you don't need OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy, or speech anymore. And that's what I told them. You cut it off when the child still needs it. Oh, well, then he'll have to go to another building, and it's too much trouble, and that's when I threatened to sue them.
Wow.
If they don't send him to the school that I looked up. But,
don't mess
parents,
with Betsy. Notice
right.
Public service announcement. Don't mess with Betsy.
That's true. I'm a mama bear. And people listen to my show, they know that. And that's how I started my being an advocate. It really was first with Josh, and then, it just went on for different causes. But, they don't, I'm going to be very blunt here. I don't know about anyone else, okay? But I will tell you this from my experience. Your local school district doesn't want to spend money on your child going out of district, okay? They don't. It costs a lot of money. It's like college tuition. But if you don't fight for your child, and it's you, the parent, who has to fight, or your guardian, your child will not get the services that they need. And, when your back goes up against the wall and it's your child, your mama bear claws or papa bear claws are going to come out. And, I just want to tell parents, you know what? Do your research on schools and that are available in your area if your child has special needs. But anyway, I'm digressing.
I think you're illustrating some good points in the book really, really vividly. Yep. I think a lot of parents, all the parents out there are mama bears and papa bears. They have this fierce loyalty and sense of commitment to helping their kids succeed. But there's not a ton of variation in that, I think. But I mean, there's exceptions, of course. There are some parents who can't quite summon that. But the vast majority of parents from all backgrounds, they do have that attitude, I think. And the difference is that I think you were a teacher in the system yourself, if I'm not mistaken, and that you probably have a college degree, right, Betsy? Am I right about that?
No, actually.
What's your background? Tell me about yourself.
This is funny. Actually, I'm a licensed practical nurse and had to stop nursing due to my eyesight, and I went into preschool because I just like to, help people, and, I like kids. And so, but I did learn a lot about child behavior just watching children that just is mind-blowing. How children are. I just love kids that, they're so honest and they don't care who they play with. They don't see color. They don't care about disabilities. They're beautiful beings, you know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I know, I agree. I mean, part of what got me interested in this is I also love kids and just find them fascinating. But to your point that you had to really go to bat for your son to get the resources that he was legally entitled to, but he wasn't going to get those resources without you putting in a lot of time and certain kinds of expertise and advocacy to make those claims a reality. And a lot of parents wouldn't have the resources or the wherewithal or the knowledge to make that happen. And that is happening in many aspects of childhood. And it happens invisibly. And parents don't even realize year after year as opportunities are sliding by their child. And what we're learning from the newer research, which gets to link kids to their long-term real-life outcomes, their income, their earnings, their wealth, their criminal behavior later in life, we're learning that these kinds of relatively mundane differences in early childhood opportunity from not just preschool, but all the way through middle school and high school, these kinds of opportunities that seem sometimes minor to parents and, you know, parents might not have the time to take full advantage of them, they really accumulate and they matter. They result in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in kids' income. And I'm not talking about income because I think it's all that matters. I just think it's a barometer for overall quality of life. You know, your health, your sense of satisfaction with your work, your well-being, some of the ways you maintain your marriage and your parenting. So the book is really trying to convince people we shouldn't ask parents to be doing so much for their kids because it's too much. It's simply overwhelming for most parents, and it just makes people feel like failures, but it's not their fault. You know, not all parents can go to bat for their kids, and not all parents can threaten lawsuits, Betsy. You know, like that's a remarkably advanced thing to do, to threaten a lawsuit in an incredible way and do all kinds of negotiating to get your kid resources. We can't expect parents to do that and put the backbone of our economy, our child development system, on those kinds of expectations of individual parents.
Well, I have to tell you, Nate, I didn't have money for a lawyer, but they didn't know that.
Yeah, I know. You were a poker player. You were a poker player.
Yeah, they didn't know that. They just don't like to hear about, you know, a lawsuit. And I told the department, the special education director, she said, well, you know, you could do due process. And I said, oh, yes, I would definitely take you to court. I said, because if you could show me in our township where they have all that Josh needs, I'll be happy to send him there. But you don't have it, and you wasted 13 years of his life.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not going to happen. And, you know, this is where, you know, parents, and I know it's not possible for all parents to really, you know, get involved and know, you know, what's available. And there should be, like, government resources to help these parents. Like, I had to find out on my own. I didn't go, well, there wasn't the internet back then, but I couldn't go on the internet to find anything out. You know, once Josh was diagnosed, I went to a support group. I did find a support group. That's where I found out about schools. But I had to do it on my own.
Yeah.
And
you know, and the internet doesn't solve all these problems. You know, it helps. It lowers the barriers to doing good research, but the internet almost provides this an overwhelming amount of information. You know, it's very complicated to go online and try. If your kid has asthma, or your kid has some problems with algebra, or your kid has some stress or, you know, depression or anxiety, you go online, you can find people saying everything in all directions, and it takes a lot of skill to parse through that and then map all that ocean of information into a strategy and a set of actions, and then carry out that strategy. It's a lot for individual parents to do on their own, in their spare time, on their own dollar.
Exactly. And some, you know, parents, they either may not know the work. I know Joshua's new math drove me crazy. I had trouble.
Josh's new what?
New math. New math problems. Yeah. Nate, I'm telling you, I could not figure it. I had to call his teacher. I could not figure it out. I mean, word problems, I had difficulty myself when I was that age, but this is like a new math type where there's no numbers. It's just this person is in front of this person, and it just drove me nuts. But I didn't have the help. I didn't know how to solve this problem. I think if it's possible, and I think your book, if I remember, brings this out, you know, to have like after school programs, to have tutor these kids, to have help.
Yeah.
Am I remembering correctly?
That's absolutely, There's a lot of movement right now to increase access to tutoring. Tutoring is a big resource that high-income parents make use of because it's expensive and they feel it's effective.
Yes.
And research has shown really persuasively through a lot of randomized controlled trials, you know, like the gold standard of research, that this kind of individual professional attention can really, really benefit kids in math especially. But also in reading. And it's just too much to ask individual working class parents to figure out tutoring on their own. You know, like if it's a big market. You know, there are people out there who are kind of exploitative and they charge a lot of money and don't provide very good quality services. And it's daunting to ask parents to just go into the Wild West and, you know, hire an independent private tutor. That's just too much. So I think it should be a bigger part of what we provide in our public education system. And just, you know, I bet some of your listeners are hearing this. I get this a lot when I talk about the book, and they're thinking like, sure, you just want this utopian world where all kids get all kinds of these big, expensive opportunities. What I want to remind readers, you know, listeners of, is we do big-scale things for elderly people. You know, Betsy, you were mentioning you're about to turn 65, and you're about to start getting these two
I have it.
services. You got them. Congratulations.
Yes.
Social Security and Medicare, you know?
Yes.
Like Medicare, if you described Medicare in 1900 or 1930 or 1950, a lot of Americans would have said, sure, okay, you want all older people to have like access to every medical service under the sun, even these expensive things, you know? Good luck with that. That sounds so utopian. And then it happened. And it was a big, long fight. And it's not like a done deal, you know, like Medicare doesn't solve all your problems, but it's this multi-$100 billion big investment in delivering on this idea that old people should have access to good medical care. And I think there's a gap in our society where we should have a similar program of a similar scale to help kids build skills. Not just academic skills, but also social, emotional, behavioral skills. I talk about in the book how people sometimes think that's the public education system, but the public education system today, the kindergarten through 12th grade system, only covers about 10% of the hours that kids have available to build skills between birth and age 18. The other 90% is this huge gap where we insist on individual parents doing everything. That's early education, you know, it's preschool, it's childcare for even before preschool, it's after school and summer programs, it's all kinds of counseling and extracurricular activities and coaching, and we provide really stingy health care for kids through Medicaid. I think that other 90% of time outside of our current K-12 system, or, you know, it could be supplementing our K-12 system or doing new programs outside of our system, I don't think it is utopian and crazy to provide a richer set of public services to fill that gap.
I agree. I think that, you know, people might think, oh, well, you want everyone to be equal. Isn't that communism? You want everyone to be treated the same. I'm going to be devil's advocate here, Nate.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that people should have equal opportunity to learn and for medical care. I mean, I'll tell you what, I thank God for Medicare. I thank God that I'm able to afford right now a supplement to supplement Medicare, because I was on the New Jersey, the, what do you call it, the universal health care, the Obamacare, whatever they call it now. That coverage really sucked. I mean, it did.
It's stingy. Mm-hmm.
Really bad. So I'm glad I'm on that. And, it is, expensive. We do, pay for it. But I think that the education system is failing children. Now, there's a lot of good teachers. I'm not saying the teachers are, folks. Don't get me wrong. There's great teachers out there.
Absolutely. We're asking too much of the public education system. If you only give teachers and schools access to a small sliver of kids' lives, and outside of that time, some kids are getting very little opportunity and very little help with their major problems, and then we ask teachers and schools to just magically fix those problems, it's going to result in frustration and failure for everybody. And it's not the fault of teachers and principals necessarily. And it's not the fault of parents. It's that we're just not providing enough public resources to do a good job with raising our kids.
And unfortunately, parenting doesn't come with a manual. You learn as you go along. I mean, I only had one. But when you're parenting, you hope you're doing a good job, and you're doing the best for your child. I mean, most parents are. There are the exceptions. What do you think of charter schools, Nate, as far as equal opportunity?
Yeah, I think charter schools are a little bit of a sideshow. I think they take up too much airtime. They're on average, they're similar to public schools in terms of the limited measures we have of quality. I think some of the charter school networks have done really interesting work, like KIPP and Success and Aspire. Some of these networks have really proven that with superb teachers and great administration and management and principals, you can do extraordinary things with lower income kids. And there's not really there's nothing that makes that impossible. These kids can learn a lot. They can catch up. They can excel. I think the problem with those schools to me is that I don't think they can really scale up, because I don't think we can find enough of the super high caliber 70-hour, 80-hour, 90-hour a week passionate teachers to scale up this style of school to all the kids who really need it. I think it's more sustainable to fill in these huge gaps outside of school and then let kids go to pretty regular public schools. Imagine if we had a really good child care and early and preschool system that all kids access. Right now, when lower income kids arrive at kindergarten, before they even set foot in the door, they are a huge step behind higher income kids, because for the first 5 years of their life, they've had much lower quality day-to-day educational environments. They're cared for by neighbors, by relatives. They watch more TV. They get less exposure to language and different varieties of experience. If these kids started life more equally and all kids were in good early education and child care systems, then poor kids would arrive at kindergarten ready to learn, just like rich kids. And the resources that we put into our kindergarten would be more adequate. We wouldn't be expecting teachers to do the heroic sort of miraculous things that KIPP and Aspire and Success and Rocket Ship are able to achieve with their elite exclusive teachers, because the burden would be more manageable. And I said that's where I come down in the book, that the charter schools are a little bit of an unrealistic way to close these gaps at scale.
I think you're absolutely right, Nate, about the advantage, or I should say, the advantages of the kids that can afford to go to a preschool versus children who can't afford to go. They might go to their local public preschool, but back in my day, nursery school was like for the exclusive, if there even was nursery school back in my day. And now it's like, if you don't have your child in preschool, they are going to be at a very disadvantaged level when they go to kindergarten, because what is taught in kindergarten now is like what first grade was when I went to school. And I think that, and not everyone can afford, to go to these exclusive preschools. They're very expensive.
Tell me about it. I have a 2-month-old and a 3-year-old, and we are very carefully budgeting about how we're going to get through the next 5 years, because we live in the Bay Area, so all the costs of childcare, all labor-intensive services in the Bay Area have these sort of absurdly inflated prices because of our housing problems. We've completely sabotaged our housing market, and that means you have to pay somebody at least $25 or $30 an hour to do absolutely anything, and that means all these services like childcare are extremely expensive. So it's very hard. And we used to think college used to be for the elite. And, centuries ago, school, straight up elementary and middle and high school used to be for the elite. And we've kind of marched our way toward a more egalitarian, wonderful outcome where we built community colleges that more people could access. Before that, we built high schools that really elevated America to lead the world in our innovation, in our manufacturing, in our research, in our productivity. And before that, it was middle schools and elementary schools. And I think it's just this hilariously tragic oversight that we have failed to expand access to early education in this country. There's just no excuse for it, and it's hurting us economically, socially, and creatively, I think.
Yes, I absolutely agree. You can just, I think a kindergarten teacher definitely could tell a difference of who went to a better preschool as far as the child's education. I found it interesting, and I had to laugh when I read the book in a way, because I have like a twisted sense of humor. But you talk about proposing an AARP, the AARP for parents. What would that look like? Because AARP is very, I get the AARP magazine ever since my mother-in-law, and so for years. And I'll tell you what, I learned a lot in that magazine, folks. I really have very informative magazine. That would be great to have like a magazine like that for parents. Yeah,
totally. It would be ideal if it were if an organization like this existed, it could kind of partner with Parents Magazine, when a sort of landmark media publication like Parents. An organization like the AARP for Parents, I think, is going to be a necessary ingredient to get parents the support they need. Because right now parents are just not a priority in Congress. They don't have the political, unified, bipartisan lobbying machine that they need to get what they deserve. So here's what AARP for Parents would look like. It would be like, the American Association of Parents and Guardians, something like that, and it would be rigorously bipartisan. It wouldn't come up with strong, controversial opinions on abortion or gun rights or charter schools. It would avoid divisive things, and it would focus on getting parents what almost all parents, Republicans and Democrats and independents, really want, which is the option to attend really good child care, the option to attend really good preschool, the option to access really good after-school and summer programs that are very expensive and complicated to access today, the option to get really good counseling and health care and coaching for their kids, the option to get good test preparation and college guidance counseling. It would provide all parents with the option to get what we know all parents are interested in, because it's what all rich parents are interested in. You don't have to force, you can just look at what rich parents do in terms of the opportunities they provide to kids and guess that all parents would like access to these kinds of opportunities. They just lack the resources and the time and the expertise to make them happen on their own. So AARP would go to bat for these more inclusive, bipartisan kinds of things, AARP for Parents, and it would start recruiting parents very early, when they're pregnant, when they're searching on, it could advertise to people who are searching for diapers or strollers or car seats, and it would offer to provide members with discounts on all of these new things that parents have to buy when they change their lifestyle. Just like the AARP provides discounts on things that you suddenly are interested in during retirement. It would also make money by offering discounts on big ticket things like life insurance, the same way that AARP makes a lot of money by like licensing healthcare products. So I think the formula of the AARP can be replicated with great success. With the right kinds of nonprofit entrepreneurs, with the right vision and the right charismatic leaders, I think we could have something on the scale of an AARP for parents, and it would be a game changer for helping kids and parents in this country.
Yes. I when I read that in your book, I was like, yeah, that's a really great idea. And then they could receive a magazine once a month to educate them about what, like we have things about seniors, what to look for, scams and, stuff about health.
Absolutely.
Information about health. Could have that for parents, what schools to look for, how to prepare your child for college and, how to prepare for, an acceptance letter for college. And, I know I'm jumping ahead here, but even what to look for in a preschool, or if you're going to go to a private school, what to look for. What to look for in a daycare, right? In a daycare facility. That would be awesome.
Once you had a trusted voice for millions of bipartisan parents, I think you could do a lot of good. And the magazine could involve interviews with celebrities. I think that's a big thing that AARP does really well. But with their magazine, they have Halle Berry and I'm not big with celebrities, but you name them, Vanessa Redgrave or I'm such an idiot with pop culture.
Yeah,
they
have
A-list celebrities in every issue, and you pick it up and you're like, wow, I'm interested to open that magazine. This organization seems prestigious and appealing, and I think parents lack that. The closest magazine that exists for this for parents from a big organization is the National PTA's magazine called Our Children, I think. And if you compare Our Children magazine with the AARP magazine, it's kind of funny, like you'll have a big interview with a major celebrity in AARP with, Selma Hayek, great photographs of Selma Hayek on the cover and getting her thoughts on life. Whereas you go to Our Children magazine and the cover story on their website is like an advertisement. It's like hand washing tips and like cleaning tips with Lysol. It's some unbelievably painfully boring, unglamorous thing. And I think that kind of sums up the power differential between older folks and younger folks in our society in some ways.
Yes. I was just really fascinated in reading your book, Nate, and I could hear the passion in your voice, and I love that. I love when people are so passionate about what they wrote about and what they care about, and it really comes across. So I thank you for that.
Thank you so much for reading the book, first of all, and for the opportunity to share my passion for this issue with your audience. I do have a passion about this because I think our society is making a lot of big mistakes, and it's costing all of us in more and less visible ways all the time. And so I'm grateful to you and folks like you when you give me an audience. It really helps.
Oh, you are welcome, and it was a pleasure talking to you. Where can people find your book to purchase it, Nate?
It's everywhere. It's all major retailers. It's The Parent Trap, and my website is natehilger.com. That has buttons that take you to any major book retailer. And you can find my email address to get in touch with me on my website. It's nathanielhilger@gmail.com. And you can also follow me on social media. All the links are there on my natehilger.com website.
Awesome. I want to thank you for coming on, Nate. Folks, I highly recommend buying this book and reading it with an open mind. And you will learn a lot of information. I found it very eye-opening, maybe because I'm 65. I don't know. I already raised my son. But I think this is great for parents, guardians, people in education, people in government need to read your book. Your book needs to be read by various and many people, Nate. And the book is The Parent Trap, How to Stop Overloading Parents and fix our inequality crisis by Nate. That's N-A-T-E-G, Hilger, Hilger. And I can't thank you enough for coming on. And, anytime you want to come back, we could discuss more of your book. I found you very interesting.
I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for your thoughtful questions, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Sure. I would love that. I have to ask you this. This has something to do with your book. How was it working with Pete Buttigieg or for him?
Oh, yeah. It was wonderful, Betsy. I hope he moving forward in his career, because he's a really inspiring character. I was fortunate to be friends with him through some mutual acquaintances when we were younger, and we're not close now. I was just a small bit player in his campaign, but working with him was great. There's nothing weird. He's a very sincere, very intelligent guy whose goal in public service is to do a lot of good and to help people who could use a more functional, more productive government. He's a genuinely brilliant, sincere, smart person. It's just a pleasure. It's a pleasure to see someone like that going into public service and having success.
I feel honored actually talking to someone who knows someone high up in government. That's awesome, and congratulations on your new baby, boy or girl.
Thank you so much. Thank you. She's a girl.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Girl.
We have one boy and one girl. Yeah.
Congratulations, and best wishes to you, Nate, on the sales of your book. And I highly recommend it. Educators, here's a book for you. Parents, get this book. Guardians, educators, principals. Really, we need to help our children or our future. And I strongly believe in that. And parents, guardians, stand up for your children. Advocate for your children. And I say this even with caregiving, and I'm going to say it with being a parent. Follow your gut instinct. That's my advice. If you think that your child is having difficulty learning or has some kind of disability, doesn't mean you don't love them. You do love them. You want what's best for them. And sometimes you need to stand up and speak up. And I had to learn that, so I'm going to pass on my advice to all of you. If someone says to you, oh, no, there's nothing wrong, go for another opinion. Insist with your child's study team to have an evaluation if you think your child is having a problem or difficulty learning. And if your child's teacher points that out and you're not aware of it, that's okay. Get your child tested. Why not? It's for free. And, use your school system for the needs of your child, because they are allowed to have a successful school education with or without disabilities. And that's it for today. As always, I want to thank Jeannie White, who's station manager, Perpetual Talk Radio, who writes a blog. Please read the blog. A lot of information about our guest today, Nate Hilger, and where you could contact him or you could buy the book. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, who's CEO of Perpetual Talk Radio, who makes this all possible. And thank you for listening and subscribing. If you don't already subscribe to Chatting with Betsy, it's for free on Spotify, Spreaker, iHeart, just to name a few. Please tell your friends about my show, Chatting with Betsy. I want to help as many people as possible. There are resources that I wish I knew about in caregiving, being a parent, and even in my youth. I want to help people, and I can't do it by myself. I need all of you to help me. And I really appreciate it, because Chatting with Betsy is to let people know that you're not alone. There's help out there. There's resources. And we all think we're alone, but we're not. And we need to share our stories. We need to have conversations about what we are experiencing. And if you hear this show and you have a story you want to tell, then contact me. at my email address, Sloan, S-L-O-A-N, that's my married name, Betsy31@gmail.com. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind, shine your light bright, because if we all did that, it'd be a much brighter kind of world. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.